What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to the show.
Glad to be back again.
We are here for a very, very special event. Entrepreneurs, practitioners, innovators, whoever you are, this is going to be one of the most groundbreaking live streams that we have ever had in the Hacker Valley studio. We are bringing together two big titans of cybersecurity. I'm honored to introduce two special folks. In one corner, we have General Keith Alexander. He is the mastermind behind IronNet Cybersecurity and a man I've worked with on 3 separate occasions. He has navigated these treacherous waters of digital warfare as the former director of National Security Agency and also the very first commander of the United States Cyber Command. He has unparalleled expertise in cyber defense. He has been instrumental in not only safeguarding the national security, but also the fabric of our digital society. And in the other corner, we have Scott McCrady. He is the powerhouse CEO of SolCyber, an organization that is revolutionizing cybersecurity for small and medium businesses, and also the very special sponsor for this event. We are talking today to talk about something very, very special, at least to me, and that's small and medium businesses. They are often forgot in the scheme of cybersecurity, so that is what we're talking about today. But first of all, General Scott, welcome to the stream.
Thanks, Chris. Honored to be here. Glad to be with you again. For yet another with both you and Ron, and of course with Scott, who is a classmate of mine. I think we went to high school together. That's my story, and I'm sticking.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Ron. Good to see you guys. And as always, General, we talk regularly, but always good to have you on the show together.
Outstanding. We have to go to the very, very beginning of your career, General. You have had exposure to so much that we will even never know about. When it comes to the world of cyber threats, what has been on the top of your mind today?
I think the biggest issue that I see for cyber threats is the fact that cyber is increasingly an element of national power. What that means is that cyber is being used by not only criminals and other terrorist-like actors, but also by nation states to accomplish nation state goals. As a consequence, when you saw things like Russia attack Ukraine in the NotPetya attack back in the 2017 time period, that went around the world.
Yep.
And it's going to grow. This is an area where countries that wish us harm are going to attack us. And we've got to be ready. And it's not just the big companies, it's all companies, because we're all connected in this space.
So let's go a little bit deeper into that because, there's a lot going on in the world, a lot of goodness, but there's also a lot of conflict. And we work in cybersecurity. And most of the time we deal with conflict like you're describing with countries. And a lot of times when you hear about APTs or large criminal groups, we always in the US are quick to point at Russia and China. So how does Russia and the Ukraine conflict and also the conversations between Russia and China impact what we see in cybersecurity today?
Yeah, so that's a great question, Ron. And I think perhaps the fundamental issue that we face on a global scale, because Russia in their attack against Ukraine is a autocratic country trying to take over a democratic country. And China and Russia have the same goals. Russia wants Ukraine, China wants Taiwan. And the fact that they're binding together is those countries that want to go after another country want the authority and the right to do it without being pushed back by other countries, which is what the West is doing today on Ukraine. And so the battle of Ukraine is a hugely important battle for our country and for all of the democratic societies around the world and others non-aligned. So how will this end and what's going to happen? It appears to me that Ukraine is holding their own. Nobody would have guessed a year or plus ago that they would be still in a war with Russia. That's just so far beyond our largest expectations for Ukraine, but they have done an amazing job. And now it's at the point where is Russia losing? And can China afford to have Russia lose? I believe the answer to that is no. And so this between Xi Jinping and Putin over the last week was more for Xi Jinping to step in and say, how do we make this not a loss? Because if Russia loses, Xi Jinping and China's ability to take over Taiwan militarily is greatly impacted. He can't afford that to happen. Xi Jinping has made that one of his top goals. Two things: fix the military and unify China under one China rule. He's not going to let that go.
Mm-hmm.
That's been going for 11 years. That's his whole life. He wants to do that. And so he can't afford to have Russia lose. And this issue with, so how does he get other states involved? I think what you saw between Iran and Saudi Arabia is part of that global effort that he's making. What you're seeing and we'll see over the next few weeks is Russia trying to say why they stole all the kids from Ukraine. Oh, no, it's not. It's a good thing. We're just stealing them for a little bit. I don't know what to say, but the International Criminal Court has already gone after Putin. So what does that lead us, and why on this topic is that important? If you want to hurt the United States, they're not going to attack us militarily. They're not going to attack Europe military. They're going to hit us with cyber on a broad scale. We can see that growing. You can see that coming. The number of attacks from Russia to Ukraine have been over 4,000 so far during this conflict. And I am concerned that that's going to grow. And we're going to see a bipolar world, I believe, created over the next 6 to 8 months. And in that bipolar world, the act that they will use against other countries will be cyber, for theft of intellectual property and for national agendas. So that's what I think is going to go on. So that makes this topic hugely important, not just for big enterprises, but for small and mid-sized companies as well, which is where Scott and SolCyber come in.
Mm-hmm. I'm glad you mentioned Scott and SolCyber, because I mean, you're right. This is a really polarized world that we're living in the terms of not only geopolitical, but also in cybersecurity. But in cybersecurity, we put a lot of emphasis on enterprise level clients, right? There are a lot of solutions for the big folks out there, but the small and medium businesses often are left out of the conversation. Do you both believe that is the case, and why is that? Let's start with you, Scott.
Hey guys, so obviously the general has great insights onto sort of the macro viewpoint on how the geopoliticals impact cyber. The thing that we saw, probably starting more maybe 5 years ago, is the small and medium enterprises became a significantly higher target using more sophisticated attacks. And there's a bunch of reasons for that, but if you just want to list a couple, their supply chain. If you just look at the government, the long tail of providers into the government, are companies that have fewer than 100 people. If you're making products or commodities, and maybe you're under $200 to $300 million in revenue, and you have 500 employees, you're probably doing that for very large companies. And what became very obvious was it was advantageous for the variety of groups out there, nation state and otherwise, to start targeting those industries, both for profit and for disruption. And so, from our viewpoint, small medium enterprises don't have the resources traditionally to withstand a consistent set of attacks against them. And obviously, from our side, we're trying to help change that and make it easier.
I'd add in, the thing that I see, and why am I on the board of SolCyber? Not because they have pictures of me, but actually,
I thought that's why.
Yeah, I thought that was why too. But actually, it's because the small and mid-sized businesses are the heart of our economy. These are the companies that feed the larger enterprises. That's the supply chain of the future. And they don't have the tools, they don't have the people, they don't have the capability. So I think the complete package that SolCyber comes in with to help small companies is actually the way to go, and an efficient way to do it, both from accept. So we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that if you want to hurt this country or our allies, you don't have to attack just the big companies. You can go after specific small companies and have a huge impact. And we've got to be ready for that. So that's why companies like SolCyber are so important to us to help fix that big gap that we have in cybersecurity.
when you look at something like an enterprise versus SMB, it's quite different. And we had someone on the podcast a while back that was kind of comparing the two between adult medicine and medicine for kids. So is there like a big difference for like the technology that you would need to use or the personnel that you need to hire? Like what's the big difference or big similarity between large organizations and SMBs?
I'll jump in on that one. I think what you saw, again, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, was this concept of you needed two different types of security. Large organizations could afford a different security posture, and small organizations didn't have to care about it as much. And again, I think that's really changed in the last few years, which puts the smaller enterprises in a tough position. And the traditional model for security is you have a bunch of smart people with a goodly amount of money, and you go through the 4,300 vendors and you sort your way through and figure out what are the pieces of technology you need to secure your organization. And then the smart people go and deploy those, and you pay up front for each of those pieces. And then you have a set of people that manage that, and then another set of people that detect and respond to that. And sometimes that's outsourced maybe to an MSSP. That model in the SMB space is a big time challenge. And it's a challenge because a lot of times they have very smart people, but they just don't have that many of them. And so constantly staying up to date on the technologies, paying up front for large security programs and the tools that drive it is very, very challenging. And then trying to drive security into their product, right? So they're all delivering something for their customers. And so this process of trying to secure the organization and also be innovative around making sure whatever they're selling is secured is a challenge. And so large organizations just tend to have more time, money, and resources, and small, medium enterprises want to do something. It's just oftentimes a challenge.
Yeah, I'll add in a couple things here. I think that the reality is when you look at a small company, they don't have the resources and the time. They're focused on doing one thing. And oftentimes they're the intellectual property. That's where innovation is created, and they need the protection. And frequently what happens is they start out as a small company, they raise money, that's public. All of a sudden, the fact that they just raised money is public, and bad guys say, oh, they got money, ransomware. Right. And so they become a target. That's part one. The others, if you just think about the ecosystem for healthcare, for energy, there are a ton of small companies out there, the same for the financial. They don't have the people to do this. So that's why a managed service like what SolCyber does is so important. It gives you complete service in doing that. And I think it wraps it across a number of things, and they're using some really good tools to get there.
And hey, Chris, sorry, follow up on that just real quick on the tooling. We focus on tools that Fortune 500 or nation states would use, but oftentimes those tools are difficult also for the small, medium enterprises to get because they're sort of complicated, or the companies don't really focus on the market because it's difficult. So that's another aspect, is sometimes it's actually very difficult to even get the tools.
I mean, it's difficult to get tools. It's difficult to get people. It really seems like the deck is stacked against the SMBs. And we love to leverage as much technology, automation, AI as possible. But the enemy is doing the same thing. They're constantly using innovation. They're on that possible adjacent, figuring out all the things that they can do to steal our information, to steal our data. What are some of the APTs doing nowadays from any term of technology, whether it's automation, AI, that is making it easier for them to target SMBs?
So there's, from my perspective, what they do is they scan the internet looking for people that are using certain types of software so that they can download a command and control or some kind of phishing email or something else to go after them to get a connection. They'll often do that even before they've figured out that's a target, and then they'll grab all that up and see what they've got and who they can go after. The interesting part, command and control, whether it's for a nation state or for ransomware, is command and control. It's the ability to command the capabilities that are there. So both enterprises and small businesses are going to face that same set of threats in a very similar manner. And so that's where you need folks with experience to say, okay, we saw phishing, we saw command and control, we're seeing a beaconing event. We know something's going on here. We can take care of it right now. And it didn't matter which enterprise you're in, it's the same type of attack. I think the difference between perhaps a nation state that's going after national objectives, that may be different, analogous to what I think Russia was doing in the 2020 sets of hacks that they went against our government, right? Solar winds. And if you think about that, that was a nation state with focus, but remember they hit 20-some thousand companies.
Yeah.
Right. And they could have easily, instead of just stopping it there and going after the government ones that they were doing, they could have pushed wiper viruses out to all of those.
Mm-hmm.
And that would have been devastating.
Yeah, Chris, I'll jump in on that one. The one thing we see also in the small, medium enterprise is that I don't think a lot of times they're aware of how easy it is to target a wide swath of companies these days. So there's still, I think, a perception sometimes of it's the hacker in his basement, right, on keyboards, doing their thing. When the reality is it's really a point and click economy right now. And so the ability to have broad targeting using sophisticated means for, as the general said, whether it's not nation state or for financial means, is much easier these days. And so this concept of silver, gold, and platinum tiers that we all used to be familiar with is really not relevant, because the tools and the capabilities that are being brought to bear are similarly sophisticated, whether or not they're targeting large organizations or small.
Mm-hmm. And I'm sure everyone at this point of the live stream are kind of shaking in their boots. They're like, what the heck can we do to defend ourselves as a small business? But one thing that I'm thinking about is not only is the threat environment seemingly more tumultuous than normal, but then also the economics of the world as it is today. Now companies are having to be very, very careful about what they invest their money in and what they don't. What are some of the best practices for SMBs to protect themselves, investing in tools and solutions, but without overspending on cybersecurity? Let's start with you, Scott.
Yeah, it's a great question. The thing that we see a lot is that the habit in the industry is to choose piecemeal tools. And then you don't really know if those tools are effective. And so the question that we get a lot is, if you're safe today, but you're breached tomorrow, what's your confidence level that you would actually know, the customer? And that's a very difficult question. And the reason is we sort of call it the overlapping fence problem. Because a lot of times people are buying tools that are overlapping, and then they leave a gap, right? So you have overlap boards and a gap and overlap boards. And of course, the bad actors come in through the gaps. We have a concept that we call minimum effective dose. And it's the ability to basically harden organizations, the people in the underlying systems. You need to be able to stop malicious code execution. So the ability to drop something onto a machine and have it do nefarious things. And you also have to do, and this is very difficult for SMBs, is you have to be able to tell as much as possible if somebody's inside the network using legitimate credentials, so harvested credentials. And so those three areas, if you think of them as very broad, you want the minimum effective dose to cover all three of those areas, so that if somebody's in via legitimate means but doing something nefarious, you can tell and get them out. If they're using code, you can stop it and remediate it, and you're constantly evolving the environment to make it more secure. And if you do those three conceptual components, you're in a position to have this aligned fence with the minimum amount of spend and the maximum amount of safety and security.
Just like with any sponsor that we have on our show, we always love to do our research. And one of the things that we found about SolCyber is that you all provide managed services for small to medium-sized businesses, and that's something that you see commonly in cybersecurity. But one of the things that I was curious about is, like, for a small to medium-sized business, they may only have one, maybe two security practitioners. They might not have any. Right. So, like, how do you go about finding the right talent? Because on the one hand, you have big budget tools, that's where SolCyber comes in, but there still has to be someone that's managing that relationship between the small business and SolCyber. So what are the things that you would say about finding great talent, hiring the right people for small to medium-sized businesses?
Yeah, another good question. So Ron, what we see in the customer base is they have a choice. So, customers call us like a security program, a drop-in security program, or security program subscription, or security program as a service, because you can just drop us in and work. Or the customer has the opportunity to try to go build this. They need to go build their security program. They need to find the right tools, the right techniques, the processes, and then to your point, the people. And so what we find is saying, for most of our customers, they're finding people when they're using us that are more what we'd call architectural and strategic. What they're saying is, how do we get security into the overall organization, primarily focused on the product, right? So how do we keep the product secured, whether or not you're in fintech or health tech or any of the other industries that we all work in. So if you're moving from servers to cloud or whatever you're doing, they have a more strategic focus, and it allows us to sort of operationalize and run the program and then feed the data up to them. And so if you're using somebody like us, it allows for a more strategic type engagement. If you're trying to build a program yourself, you have to have a lot more hands-on keyboard folks that are getting up in the morning and looking at alerts and events and trying to correlate data across disparate systems. And so it's a challenge. And so most of the people that we work with are taking that and offloading that to us, and then allowing them to be more architectural, engineering, and strategic focused.
What's your perspective on that, General? I mean, me and Chris, we met at your company, and at that time it was a smaller company. How did you compete with the larger companies, like with getting the right talent to ultimately build a product?
Well, for getting talent, the nice part about having been in the jobs I was in, I knew a lot of the people, and we were able to bring together, both from the commercial side and from the former government side, a bunch of great people. I think the key, though, going back here, for the small, mid-sized businesses, the real key is you may not know who is a good person to run your security. And so you go get somebody who says, yeah, I know how to do that. They can set up the IT, and they're a whiz at doing that. They may be a whiz at setting up the IT and doing things. They may not know how to hunt on your network to find bad things. So it's the different, and you saw, Ron, our hunters were some of the nation's best guys that had gotten out of the military. So having people that are world-class like that to hunt for the small and mid-sized business, which is what Scott set up with SolCyber, is a very similar thing. So instead of having everybody have a third of a good guy, how about you have a good guy that runs a cost and does it for a number of companies, and they can do it and do a much better job, and they're world-class at it. My experience in doing this is the people that do this every day and have the tools are the best at it, because it's like any sport. They're world-class athletes in this area, and that's what you need. And with a small company, if you think about just the network of a small company, you're hunting on that. It's kind of, well, I'm not sure what I'm looking for. How do I know what I see? I'm not familiar with domain generation algorithms. I'm not familiar. What are they using DNS for? How could DNS command and control? What's going on with it? So having all that knowledge is very hard to get in one person. That's where teams come together, both at IronNet and at SolCyber.
Yeah, the General, I'll piggyback. The General's so right on this. We had a great call with a mid-sized customer, very smart IT and security staff, but operating some of the tools that they'd gotten recently, you could tell they're like, we just don't deal with this on a regular basis. And candidly, that's why we have smart people, right? Because I don't deal with it anymore on a day in and day out basis. And so, we had 3 or 4 people of different tiers. Everybody in our SOC teams, it's all tier 2, tier 3. But we have, super senior engineer type folks, and they were able to walk them through. And so I think the General hits a good point, which is it's just difficult to get the tiers of talent and the specialty that you need. And especially, again, if you're a Fortune 4 bank, sure. But if you're mid-market, it's difficult.
Even for some enterprises, it's still difficult, and that's why enterprises also use managed services as well.
Yep.
That's right. In fact, Ron, you bring out a great point.
Yep.
You can see the trend is going towards working together in a common picture. So that's where managed service has advantages over a single entity. They can see it across multiple. And as we start working multiple entities together, that'll build a radar picture in cyber for the country. That's where we need to go. And that's where this partnership between Scott and what we're doing has become so important. That's how it actually started out. You say, so how do we get all this with Scott? Well, it was in talking with one of his investors about the need for Scott and a team like that to do what needs to be done. It fills an important gap that our nation has.
I thought it was back in high school where y'all started talking about it.
We're the same age.
That's right. Well, you were part of that class.
Well, so Ron, think about this though, right? So the general's on two boards, right? Amazon and ours. And he's running IronNet, which is a nation state grade security solution, including managed services. And we're obviously helping out the SMB space with a drop-in security program. If you start thinking about that as it sort of relates to the nation, there's a lot of capability that we can bring to bear to start trying to shore up all the systems. And as the general says, that's a virtuous feedback loop that allows everybody to get stronger together.
100%. You know, when I think about the people side, because the people, I think from my perspective is the most important part, then processes, and then ultimately you get to technology. But we kind of get wrapped up in the technology bit, but it is important, especially for the small businesses that don't necessarily have all of the talent that they need to do everything. What are some of the most crucial controls that a small business can have in their environment to protect themselves from these high level threats? And then that second part of the question is, when those things fail, there's this thing called cyber insurance. Cyber insurance came around and I said, I don't know how that business model is going to work, but I know it's going to be important for those small businesses to have. How hard is it for small businesses to get cyber insurance? And what are the best practices there as well?
And Chris, we have cyber insurance similar to you. Is I sort of started bumping into it when I was with FireEye and Mandiant, and it was this new sort of exciting space. And obviously, it's a challenging space because it's new. You don't have the legacy data to look at. And as we've seen, there's been a lot of problems in the cyber insurance coverage models in the last few years. And so what we're seeing right now across the industry is you're getting about a 1 in 3 rejection rate. And you're seeing anywhere from a 50 to 100% increase in costs. And so that combination is sort of broad based. And so whether or not you're a small, medium, or large enterprise, you're running into the same problem. And the rejections are sort of the way I describe it is the cyber insurance industry has so much demand on them that they're at a place where it's easy for them to sort of say, you know, I'm not interested right now. So if you fail any sort of small detail, they're just going to put you to the bottom of the stack, right? And go to the people that have all the check marks in place. We believe we have a really good solution to this. So we got ahead of this problem, and it's partly due to the fact that we drop in a security program. And so if you think about the insurance industry, when they talk to a company, the applications are getting massive, and there's this long list of things that an organization has to do to get their cyber insurance. But the cyber insurance industry doesn't really know if those have been programmatically implemented and continuously updated and run properly. So when we went to the cyber insurance industry about 1.5 years ago, is we said, we are dropping in a fully managed security program, right? You're getting your managed security services, you're getting your active defense, you're getting your hunting, you're getting all your tooling, you know, it's per user per month. So it's very easy for our customers to consume it. And then we're going to run it, deploy it, and make sure it's working properly. The cyber insurance industry loved it because they were saying, basically, this is the one place where we can sort of guarantee that the security that they say they're doing is actually happening. And so with our customers, they have the opportunity to go get what we call expedited cyber insurance. So they're pre-approved. They are getting an expedited application. And they get a 30% discount off their cyber insurance policy and a 10% rebate. And so what we're trying to do is put this connective tissue between the security program, right, and the cyber insurance industry. Because right now, that connective tissue is a person that gets an application dropped on them once a year and spends 8 weeks dealing with, you know, risk managers and paperwork. And so we're just trying to make the CTO, CIO, CISO's life easier, and then have that drive up into the CFO and have them save their money so that a company can be very resilient, both from a programmatic security standpoint and also from a cyber insurance standpoint. And if you do both of those things, you're in a really, really good position to sort of withstand, you know, what's coming at you.
And so Scott, he has the insurance part on lock. General, what would you say is the most important controls that a business should be thinking about today to protect themselves?
Well, I agree with what Scott has put on the table. I think those are the controls. I think one of the issues that we've got to step back and look at is what's going to come after a country, what's going to come after large enterprises and small enterprises, and what are the risks. So we've talked about advanced persistent threats, we've talked about criminal actors. And both of those are things that we're seeing racing down the road. The criminal actors to steal money and intellectual property, nation states to do theirs. Here's the issue as we go through this. Our nation is going to increasingly go to where you bring multiple small companies together under a managed service. It's just more efficient and more effective. They can do it at a lower cost. And so, that's one of the key things. How do you get this for less than what you would spend for people? That's part one. And two, how do you do it in such a way that the nation, in this case, U.S. Cyber Command, who has a responsibility to defend the nation when the nation is under attack, can see it? That's where we're going with cyber. You think about attacks and what's coming. If it's an element of warfare, we're going to see how you defend a nation from those types of attacks. China has said in their rhetoric that they would attack a technologically sophisticated country with cyber first. And that's not just big companies, that's the whole range. And so now we're on a journey, we're in a race to defend our country. And we had this discussion when I was in government with the president and the secretary of defense. We're not about just protecting some of the country some of the time, right? When you think about it, you'd say, well, what about me, right? Think about like a banking thing. If there's a banking crisis, you don't say, well, only the big guys are going to get their money back. All the little guys are toast.
Right.
And in cyber, how are you going to defend the nation? The answer is you got to see it. We got to work together. This is an important step to getting to where our nation needs to go in this process. I think it is extremely important. And I would encourage the viewers to think about the fact that it's growing. We're seeing artificial intelligence, generative AI, ChatGPT, all these things coming in that the adversary is going to use in the next couple of years to attack with, because now they can use all this code, turn it around and start attacking. So the frequency and duration of attacks by criminals is going to grow. And those between criminal and nation states are going to get closer together, as you see from Russian hackers today. Russian hackers that go after small and medium-sized businesses at nighttime, in the daytime are doing APTs. And at nighttime, they're using some of the same tools they used in the daytime. Oops.
Right.
So you've got all this going on, and it comes back to one key point. How do we work together? How do we do this together as a country? And how do we work with our allies?
100%. How do we work together? It's one team, one fight, as we say in the Marine Corps. And Scott, one of the things that your company does, I think, is outstanding, is you do focus on that SMB arena, right? You really have it on lock on the managed services side. There are other companies like ContraForce that are trying to do things from a technical means. When it comes to protecting the SMBs, what is your company doing that enables you to scale and support so many folks out there that might not have the dollars or the resources to do it themselves?
Yeah, Chris, the simple answer is you have two options, right? When you're trying to support the SMBs, and that is the traditional model, which is try to let them make decisions and then support them in those decisions as sort of a professional services, model. That is a model, and there's a lot of companies that do that. But our view was, though that's interesting, that doesn't help get scale. So if we want to protect a bunch of SMBs, then there's a few things that you have to do. The first one, ironically enough, is you have to get the financial model right. So we don't have any install fees. Everything's paid per user per month. And I know that sounds so trivial, but the fact is every security product and service you have to buy practically for SMB, you have to pay an upfront check. So it's $50,000 for this one, $20,000 for that one. So the first thing you have to do is you have to get this into a financial package that makes it easy for the SMBs to say yes, right? That makes their life easier That's why we do the cyber insurance stuff. The second piece is, the generals talked about it. Like, you have to have, whatever you call it, nation state grade security or Fortune 500 level security, whatever the nomenclature, you have to be able to repel sophisticated attacks. And the SMBs sort of know it intellectually, but being able to mentally prepare themselves for the process of doing that and what it all takes from a tools, technologies, and people standpoint is a challenge, right? So AV and a firewall isn't going to protect an SMB in today's world. And it maybe was sufficient 5 years ago. So then you have to have nation state or Fortune 500 level tools. And so that's really sort of what we did, was we said, listen, there's going to be a package, we call it foundational security, foundational coverage. It's going to have nation state grade level tools. Those are very expensive traditionally. We're going to deploy them at scale. And then we're going to get nation state grade people to run them, to do the hunting, the response, the detection, so that we're actually solving the problem for the customers. We're not sending them alerts and saying, hey, good luck, here's an IP address we think something bad's at. We're saying, Scott McCrady has a problem on his machine. This is what we did to fix it, and we're letting you know about it. And so you have to blend those two things. And so for us, we call it a security program. And so we drop it in. And it allows for companies to really quickly get to this high level of security, but in a very financially easy to consume model. And we use the same tooling so that we can get scale. Because if you try to do it across 1,000 tools, you're not going to be able to get the scale. You're not going to be able to get the financial model into a package that allows the SMBs to purchase it.
Mm-hmm. There's another question that comes up as we talk about this, and that is, this distance between an enterprise and what the nation state's going to defend against, and what's going on here in the small, medium-sized businesses. So let me give you some thoughts on that, because this highlights the important. It's called sharing between both. Mm-hmm. This is our country. It's everybody. It's not this group. Mm-hmm. It's the whole thing. And the nice part about the large enterprises with global scale is they see a lot of information. Mm-hmm. So the ability from a threat perspective is to identify, think of it as all the command and control that's being developed out there, and go after that. And then share it with MSSPs like SolCyber. So they now have access to all this information from their threat feeds and other things. That's not just nation state, although one of the most popular command and control is Cobalt Strike. Everybody uses it. They use it for bad. It's all over. There's a lot of it. The key is knowing when it's being used for bad. And it will be used for bad against enterprises and against small businesses. Mm-hmm. Ransomware, nation state attacks. And the reason is you go with the easiest one first. I want to use the easiest one to get in. If that didn't work, I'll step it up. And then my last resort is to use a 0-day. Right. I normally don't have to use that against an SMB, but I'll save that for enterprise. So it's by feeding, seeing this information is like a radar picture. How do you see what's going on? And a small company by itself doesn't have the visibility of all that's going on. That's why a managed service is so important. Put hundreds and hundreds of companies together and imagine what you can see, and then tie that managed service with other large cyber companies that are out there working together. And all of a sudden you get a huge jump in capability that you could not get by a small company by itself.
Right. You make a good point about sharing in between when you're talking about enterprise and small business, but even the commercial sector and the government, right? Our dear friend, I'm sure we're all friends, Director Jen Easterly, she's really, pushing that charge forward with CISA, getting everyone together, right? One team, one fight. Again, that's the same old Marine Corps motto. And I think that's really what's going to make a difference for our nation, is really everyone banding together, sharing information, sharing techniques and tactics, because the enemy is doing the exact same thing. What do you all think about the relationship between the government and industry? Do you feel like there's some things that we could do even above and beyond what we're doing already to ensure that everyone is cohesive? Or do you feel like we've done enough at this point in time?
I'll take the first shot at that, because I'll start with, we haven't done enough. I think the vision is good. Mm-hmm. Now it's how do we actually implement it? We talk about collective defense. That's what we just were going through. How do we now do that in such a way that it's not manual? because if you're sharing events manually, machines are talking at machine speed.
Mm-hmm.
We insert people in there to say, what did he say? And then you type it up and I send something out. And then with the machines going, think of the way communications are set up. There's no human in there going, do you want to talk? Yeah, he wants to talk. Okay, he's going to talk. He's talking, right? He's going to done. It's connection.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same thing. This is an internet where traffic flows freely and at speed. So we have to have the ability to see what's going on the bad side, whether it's hackers, ransomware, or nation states. And it's that kind of visibility that we've got to get good at sharing. I think what Jen is doing at JCDC, what the Defense Department's doing with their National Cyber Center, and what the FBI does with the NCI JTF, all good starts. It's got to be automated. This cannot be a manual thing, because if you think about what happened with the NotPetya attack, that happened in seconds.
Yep.
You're not going to defend against that if you're defending manual. So we got to get good. And then, as you did in the Marine Corps, my dad was in the Marine Corps, so I got this down. You've got to have practice. You got to train and practice doing that. So first thing, I think the great value for what SolCyber is doing is it's starting that thing for the small mid-sized business. And I think it's at great value and at a great price. And as you think about it, imagine that you're not being defended by somebody who only knows a little bit. You're seeing now this whole bandwidth, and it's growing us towards that national objective of collective defense.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, the general hit the key pieces. I think it's got to come from both directions, right? Obviously, when you talk about nation state grade capabilities, the U.S. government is second to none. We get contacted from SMBs that get contacted by three-letter agencies that say they have a problem, right? So coming tops down government side, there has to be a better integration for us to get access to data so that we actually know what's happening, so that we can be ahead of that. But at the same time, it's incumbent upon us to try to build solutions that can feed back, can cover a larger swath of customers in an easier manner, so it makes it easier for them to get protected, and then feed some of that data back. And so, you're going to start seeing requests, both probably starting in the cyber insurance side, but probably on the government side, to say, can we get anonymized certain types of data back into systems to validate that what's happening across a larger swath of SMBs? Because it's called Fortune 500 for a reason. There's 500 of them. There's 600,000 customers in our target market. 600,000. So it's just such a big footprint that the data has to be moved into an automated fashion, and those bidirectional communications have to be solidified in something that we can all nod our head at and say, yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
With what you're doing, Scott, what does that process look like? What does that engagement look like for a small business that wants to protect themselves and work with someone like you to get to a place where they aren't the small fish in this pond? What does that look like? We try to keep,
we've been doing this a long time. As you know, as the general I like to say, we're not young founders. And one of the lessons from our side from just doing this is we just try to be super transparent, right? And so, pricing's on the website. Now there's bands. If you're sort of mid-market at 1,000 employees, that's a different price. And if you're at 100, of course. But it's really super easy. You can just go to the website and say, I'd like to get some information. We're incredibly not pushy. We're very practical. We'll run customers through. We have a 15-minute intro call, and we literally just say, this is the program. This is why the program works. This is how much it's going to cost. It's going to be monthly. We take a look at what they're doing currently and what they have in place, and we talk about how that can be rationalized. And it's a very straightforward process. We have some amazing technical capabilities, but I have a joke with my team. If I ever hear them say the words AI or ML, on a call with the customer, they're going to get put into the corner and said to behave themselves, because we try not to get too technical. We really are trying to solve a business problem for the folks. And if they want to know, we can talk about some of the amazing technical stuff that we do and the tools that we use. But generally speaking, it's a very business conversation and saying, let's help you get secured. This is sort of the risk financial model, that if something bad happens, this is about how much it costs for an organization like yourself. Let's take that and lower that significantly, back it up with some cyber insurance, and just get this problem off your plate. So if you're safe today, but something happens tomorrow, we're going to know about it. We're going to be able to fix it for you, and you're going to be able to continue on. And customers just like that certainty. They like the certainty, and we try to make it as financially easy as possible. So that's as much of a no-brainer as can be.
Hey, if you use AI ML on me, it will work all day, every day. I love it.
Or Ron, you're one of the smart ones, right? You know what you're talking about. Most of our customers are CFOs and we see a lot of CEOs and a lot of board members, and these people are very smart, but they are just so focused on trying to stay alive in today's competitive environment. So we try to keep it very business.
You know what? I'm ready for some scenic details, right? We've been talking about the threats. We've been talking about countries, nation states, technology, even to some degree. But you are in the trenches with the small, the medium-sized businesses, and maybe even some large organizations, since there's like additional tiers that you all have. Take us through a walk down memory lane. Like, what's one of these stories that you can share from start to finish? Like, what was the normal at first? What was the explosion? Maybe it was you all coming in and finding or helping the organization. And then what was the new normal? Share us a success story, Scott.
So it's our story is very much in the, a lot of companies are buying one of two things, right? They either have something in place or they don't have much in place. And so we've been in a lot of situations where a 3-letter agency calls the company, we get contacted. And so there's a process around figuring out what's happening, why it's happening, where's the information going, why is it locked up? Is it a cyber organization, and are they tied into a government organization? So that process is obviously very daunting for most organizations. We try to get ahead of that so they don't have that problem with our customers. But we've been in many situations where we're able to get that corralled very quickly, off the systems, put them back into a good place, and then give them sort of an outline of what happened and how they're protected going forward. And so in the SMB space, that's more the traditional model. In my career, I've been involved in some super large situations where nation states have taken employees of companies hostage during negotiations over commodities, and I've seen some crazy things. But I would say still my crazy things are probably a tip of the iceberg compared to some of the stories that General has.
Yeah, what about one of the stories that you've helped your customers with? Like, what's been one of those trying times, and can you describe like the situation that they're in and how they were able to get themselves out of it?
Yeah, I mean, so for us, we're actually solving the problem if somebody's breached, right? So we solve two problems: if they're pre-breached or they're breached, right? If they're pre-breached, it's a relatively straightforward process of deploying the solution. Now, ironically, we have deployed the solution and found problems inside the organization when we've gone to do that. And so, the entire goal of that is to get to good so that they're in a very clean and hygienic situation. The other situation we have, obviously, is when customers are breached. And so if they're breached, we'll do it ourselves or work with a partner to get a company through the process, right? And depending on the level and details of the breach, it's something that we can actually get everything cleaned up, get it controlled, figure out whether or not something was removed, obviously, and then get everything put in place so that we know that if they come back and knock on the door again tomorrow, which is very common, right? If somebody gets breached, it's very common to be re-breached, that they have the right solutions in place. So mainly for the small, medium enterprises, you're moving them from a state of not known to secured.
Yeah, I'm going to give you another story here that kind of gets you back to the small business stuff. And that was when I ran the National Security Agency. I was also the head of the offensive capability for cyber at the Joint Functional Component Command for Net Warfare. That was the offensive team from the military. And then we got hit by Russian hackers with agent.btz, which was the Buckshot Yankee. Now, the issue was that was into the military networks at the highest level. The NSA team detected it. We brought it back, our 1,500 pieces of malware, and that capability they solved in 22 hours because they had the technical cyber experience to do it that the IT folks didn't quite have in that area. So what Secretary Gates and President Bush did, and then President Obama, was say, okay, we've got bind together the offense and defense and make sure that the people who are defending it have both that experience.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was the creation of Cyber Command. And when you think about it, now what you have in a managed service provider is the same capabilities. People with that type of experience who can look at these networks. It's not just the IT experience, but it's also all the experience in handling what's going on in the malware, the way bad guys attack, and get really good at going after that. I think that's the key, and that's what's so important. Most companies will set up an IT shop because they need communications, and they'll do the cloud, and they'll say, I've got da-da-da. And that's it until something happens.
Mm-hmm.
And that's either one or two events. They're raising money and somebody hits them, or they have great IP and somebody hits them.
Right.
The great IP, intellectual property, oftentimes that goes unnoticed. Mm-hmm. They're losing their future because somebody's stealing it, probably from China. So it's all of that we have to put together and get our arms around. And that's where I think this approach with the managed service is so important for the small, mid-sized companies.
100%. We're going to get to Q&A. This has been an outstanding conversation already. But while our team is pulling up some of the questions from the chat, I don't know if everyone knew this, but I used to teach physical red teaming back in the day. And when I started at IronNet, I brought all my lock-picking toys, my alarm bypass toys, and we had it right there on the SOC floor. And General would come around from time to time. I actually taught General Alexander not only how to pick locks, but also how to pick handcuffs. General, did you keep up with that at all?
I still have that stuff. In fact, I got
awesome.
My grandkids that, and hopefully they're not breaking and entering, but they're using it.
There you go. I love it. Outstanding.
All right, let's get to the questions. We just have the first one pulled up. And as we're pulling these up, feel free to drop your questions into the chat. These are all live. But here goes. What kind of solutions, Scott, for your organization are tailored to the SMB? What's the biggest challenge their organizations face? And, what kind of owners or managers are you working with for the SMB?
That's a great question. So the challenge for the owners and the managers is they are not usually cyber, they haven't had a lot of time and experience with cyber. And so they don't really understand that the risk profile against them has changed significantly, unless they've had a friend or a board member who's gone through a ransomware, and then they know. And so the biggest challenge is sort of trying to align their expectations without just pushing a bunch of fear, because that's not really what you want to do, but you're just saying, hey, there's a lot of risk out there, especially against XYZ organization or in a vertical like yourselves. And so it's trying to get them up to speed on sort of the risks. And then again, from our side, the main solution is what we call foundational coverage, which is a minimum effective dose of tools. So these are products that are well known in the industry, people and process that we drop in. So we drop in a security program and allows them to, again, check the box, get this off their plate and move forward. But getting the owners and the managers to understand the risk is a challenge sometimes.
Yeah, I saw that you have Jeff Mann on there, who's
cyber legend.
Yep. Thanks, Jeff. Thanks. Great work.
All right, as an SMB, we want to secure as we can with a reasonable budget. However, the cost associated with having enterprise solutions is daunting. Managed services isn't the answer for us, as the cost is ridiculous. What out-of-the-box solutions, and it's cut off there, but I'm guessing what out-of-the-box solutions would you recommend for SMB?
Again, great question. So the problem with the out-of-the-box solutions is you still have to go buy them, procure them, manage them, and run them, and look at them, and care and feed them. And so the silver bullet from a product standpoint isn't really out there. Our view is traditional managed services is expensive, and products are expensive, and they're all paid up front. Our thought is try to make that easier by paying per user per month and get the tooling and the products and the services all together. And again, the pricing that we have out there we rarely get problems with the pricing. So it's very cost effective to get the tooling. And we tend to run about 40 to 50% cheaper than if a customer just were to go buy the tools themselves. That's even before they get managed services. So we just get scale.
Yeah, I think one of the things, Christy, that you should look at here is that what Scott just said, he gets the tools at a discount because he's doing a lot of them. And so you get a break there. And he also gives you the ability to select what set of tools. They give you a recommendation. Here's what you should have. You can have 12 sets. You can have 6. Here's what you need is these. And then here's what these additional protections will provide. And here's the cost per user, per employee, per month. I think that way you can say, okay, then you can look at that and say, yeah, that makes sense. If I did it for that much, we're talking, a few $1,000s a month for some companies, maybe a little bit more. You can't hire a person for that to actually do it. So I think it would make sense to just take that stuff and look at it as it goes in. As you look at what your company needs, lay that out, talk to one of those folks, and it's kind of like chicken soup. It can't hurt.
Yeah. And I'll just tag onto that really quickly is I call it the valet, right? Is you pay your $5 or $10 to the valet, which is a lot better than getting towed away, right? And so when we talk to small, medium enterprises, we basically say, listen, getting towed away is not fun. It's not, I've had it happen. I'm probably sure most people have. It's just not pleasant. It's expensive. Pay the $5 or $10 for your valet, and now you don't have to worry about that. And so to us, we're trying to make that easy to say yes, because we want to get companies secured.
Yeah. So let me just answer the question that's on the screen for Scott. So I'll make it easy for you, Scott, because it seems to me you have to set up a budget. If you're the person that has to get cybersecurity, the first thing I would do if I was in a small company is I'd go over to SolCyber and say, I have this company. Here's what we're doing. Tell me what I would need to provide this level of protection. What's the cost, and how does that go forward? Lay me out the options and then give that to me, and I'll go talk to my leadership and see if they're interested in doing that along with these protections. That's probably the easiest way. And if you say, well, I'm doing this, but I'm not a cyber person, I was just tagged to go do this. Can you have somebody brief the board or brief the CEO? Yep, they can do that too. So you benefit from that. So it's kind of, it's like the easy button. You want help? Just ask.
Yep. And I'll tag on to the general's point there. The board is it's incredibly rare that we run into an SMB that the board isn't highly supportive of a good cybersecurity program. So we're happy to, because we work with a lot of, directors and what have you. And so they go, I don't know if I'm going to get the support. It's very common to get the support from the CEO and the board.
Awesome. You know what? We are just at about time, but before we jump off, Scott, I wanted to, ask you and also the general, is there anything that you want the audience to know about SolCyber or what you have cooking up next?
General?
I think it's a great opportunity. I'd encourage you to reach out. If you're in a small business and need help in cyber, reach out to SolCyber and see what they can do for you.
Yeah, and I'll just say that we try to make it as approachable as possible. We literally talk about approachability. This is a really daunting type of environment, and we talk about a lot of daunting topics, but we try to make it as approachable as we can, both from the way we engage with customers. You can see all of our stuff on our website. We don't hide the ball. Pricing's there. Our engagement with sales teams is very approachable. So we try to make it easy. And listen, if there's not a fit or you want to go a different direction, we're like, hey, we totally get it. So for me, go to SolCyber.com and don't worry about whether or not that's the right thing or the wrong thing, or maybe you're a little bit nervous about it. Just go. We'll have a super transparent conversation, see if we can help you. And our goal is to get as many SMBs secured and into a good position and a good security posture over the many years.
Outstanding. Gentlemen, thank you so much for this conversation. It was honestly an honor, and everyone else seemed to enjoy it as well. If we didn't get to your question, I'm sure there's someone from SolCyber or even IronNet are going to pop in there and assist you as best as they can. Be sure to visit SolCyber and check out what they have going on. And with that, we will see everyone next time.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Ron. Great job.